Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a question that's been around forever. How do you tell a visionary from a con artist?
Yeah, it's the age-old question, isn't it?
It really is. And to help us unpack this, we're going to delve into the life of Belle Gunness, a Norwegian immigrant who made headlines in the early 1900s.
Gunness, she's a really fascinating case study because her story, it's like walking a tightrope between ambition and something much darker.
Exactly. So to get to the bottom of this, we've got a whole stack of sources.
Yeah.
Newspaper articles from back then, biographical accounts, and even some court records.
Wow, so we're really going deep.
Oh yeah, as deep as we can.
Mm-hmm.
So Gunness arrives in the U.S. in 1881, and she settles in Chicago. Pretty standard immigrant story so far, right?
Seems like it.
There's a guy named Mad Sorensen. They open a candy store.
A candy store.
Yeah. Sounds pretty all-American dreamish, right?
Yeah, on the surface it does, but if you start peeling back the layers, you notice a pattern of fires. Suspicious fires.
Oh, like more than just bad luck.
Yeah, their home, their business. Multiple fires, each one resulting in an insurance payout.
Starting to see where that con artist question comes in.
Right, and it wasn't just fires. Tragedy also struck their family. 4 of their children died.
Oh, wow.
2 were infants, supposedly from acute colitis.
Acute colitis. That sounds rough.
It was a tough diagnosis back then. The symptoms could be mimicked by a lot of things,
Including?
including poisoning.
Okay, so now we're getting into truly murky territory.
We are. And
Yeah.
to add another layer to this, there were life insurance policies on all 4 children.
And she collected on those.
She did.
So was this just a streak of incredibly bad luck, or was something more deliberate happening?
It's hard to say for sure, but the financial gains from the fires and the children's deaths, they definitely helped Gunness build up a nice little nest egg.
Right, almost like she was building her fortune on a foundation of tragedy.
That's one way to look at it.
Then in 1900, Mad Sorensen dies.
Yeah.
On the very day, 2 of his life insurance policies overlapped.
What are the chances?
Talk about a coincidence.
The initial doctor who examined Sorensen, he actually suspected strychnine poisoning.
Strychnine. Isn't that like a rat poison?
It was a pretty common poison back then, readily available, often used in pesticides.
So not something you'd want to accidentally ingest.
Definitely not. It causes these horrible muscle contractions,
Ugh.
convulsions, a really painful death.
And they suspected that's how he died.
The initial doctor did, but the family doctor overruled him, said it was heart failure, and no autopsy was performed, so.
So we're left with a big question mark hanging over the whole thing.
Exactly. But one thing we know for sure is that Gunness received a hefty payout from Sorensen's life insurance. Around $8,500.
$8,500. That was a fortune back then, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. A huge sum.
And what did she do with this newfound wealth?
Well, she bought a farm near Laporte, Indiana.
A farm. It's almost like she was trading one business for another. Only this new venture had a much darker potential.
And that's where things take a really interesting turn. She starts placing these Lonely Hearts ads in newspapers looking for wealthy bachelors.
So she's a widow now.
Right. Yep. And she plays that card to the hilt, portraying herself as this grieving woman longing for companionship.
Classic.
Right. And men, being men, they flock to her farm, drawn to the promise of a fresh start with this seemingly successful, attractive woman. But here's the thing. Many of these men disappeared without a trace.
Vanished into thin air.
Pretty much, leaving behind all their belongings and often large sums of money.
Okay, so that's definitely raising some red flags.
Yeah, one case in particular stands out. John Moe, a farmer from Minnesota. He withdrew a substantial amount of money before heading to Laporte to meet Gunness. Never heard from again.
Wow.
Then there's Old Lady Budsberg, a widower from Wisconsin, mortgaged his farm, got a big cash payout, traveled to Laporte.
Same story.
Gone.
Okay, so there's definitely a pattern emerging here. Men arrive at Gunness's farm full of hope and their pockets full of cash.
And then poof.
Like they never existed.
Exactly.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? These men drawn in by the promise of a new life, only to vanish without a trace.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what were they thinking? Were they blinded by her charm, or were they just victims of their own loneliness?
Maybe a bit of both. But amidst all these disappearances, there's one man who stands out. Ray Lamphere.
Ah, yes. The farmhand. He seems to have been both infatuated with Gunness and possibly jealous of her suitors.
Dangerous combination.
For sure. According to some accounts, he was head over heels in love with her.
Really?
Yeah, helped with the farm work, ran errands, totally devoted.
Sounds like the perfect employee.
On the surface, maybe? But this devotion, it seems to have had a dark side, a possessive edge.
So, not exactly the kind of guy you want around if you're a wealthy bachelor visiting a lonely widow.
Definitely not.
So Lamphere, he becomes this key figure in this whole saga, both a witness and potentially an accomplice.
Precisely. And he claimed to have knowledge of Gunness's activities, hinting at a much darker side to her personality and her business ventures.
And then in April 1908, a fire engulfs the Gunness farmhouse. Yeah, a massive one. At first, everyone believes that Gunness and her 3 children died in the blaze.
Seemed like a fitting end to a tragic life, wouldn't you say?
It would. But as investigators start digging through the ashes, they make a horrifying discovery.
What did they find?
A headless female body in the basement.
A headless body?
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's just creaky.
Right. At first, everyone assumes it's Belle Gunness.
Makes sense. Fire. Tragic demise. Case closed.
Except it wasn't neighbors and friends. They started raising doubts.
What kind of doubts?
The body, it was smaller than Gunness. And the dental work didn't match.
So maybe it wasn't her after all.
Exactly. The whispers started, could this be an elaborate scheme, a way to escape justice? It was like something out of a dime novel.
A fire, a headless body, and a missing widow. It's the perfect setup for a mystery.
And fueled by these doubts and the pleas of worried relatives, the authorities decide to exhume the farm.
Exhume the farm, what does that mean?
Dig it up. Basically, they wanted to see what was buried beneath the surface.
And what did they find?
What they uncovered was a scene straight out of a nightmare. Dozens of shallow graves scattered across the property.
Shallow graves.
Filled with bodies. Men, women, even children.
Oh my God.
It was a scene of unimaginable carnage. Among the victims were Gunness's own children, buried alongside the men who would answer her lonely hearts.
So it wasn't just the missing suitors, she was killing everyone.
Seems that way.
Okay.
And the way the bodies were disposed of, it pointed to something truly sinister.
What do you mean?
They were all dismembered in a similar fashion. Heads, severed limbs removed. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This was methodical. This was planned.
That's cold-blooded.
And this is where Ray Lamphere's testimony comes into play.
The farmhand.
He confesses to helping Gunness dispose of the bodies.
So she was in on it.
At least to some extent. According to Lamphere, Gunness would poison her victims, dismember them, and then bury them in various locations around the farm, including the hog pen.
The hog pen. That's just horrific.
It is, but it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. It gives us a glimpse into the horrifying reality of what was happening on that farm.
So he basically confessed to being her accomplice.
He did. But even Lamphere's confession, it's not entirely clear-cut. Some neighbors claim he was more involved than he let on, suggesting that he might have been an active participant in the murders, driven by jealousy and possessiveness.
So it's possible he was more than just a lovesick helper.
Exactly. And then there's the question of the headless body in the basement. Was it a random victim? Or was it part of a carefully staged plan to fake Gunness's death? In 2008, DNA testing was conducted on the remains in an attempt to answer this very question.
What were the results?
Inconclusive. The sample was too old, too degraded to provide any definitive answers.
So we're still left wondering, did Belle Gunness die in that fire? Or did she manage to escape, leaving behind a trail of death and unanswered questions?
It's a mystery that continues to baffle historians and true crime enthusiasts to this day. And it brings us right back to our initial question, grifter or gifted.
Was she a brilliant businesswoman who simply took things too far? Or was she a cold-hearted killer motivated by greed and a thirst for power?
It's tempting to just label her a monster,
Yeah.
but maybe there's more to the story. Some people say that maybe she was a victim of circumstance, a woman who was pushed to the edge by a world that wasn't exactly kind to women back then.
That's true. Life in the early 1900s, it wasn't easy for women. They had limited options. They were often financially dependent on men. And societal expectations could be incredibly restrictive.
So was she a mastermind? A cold-blooded killer? Or was she just a product of her time? A woman pushed too far by a system that didn't give her many choices?
It's a tough question to answer. Maybe it was a bit of everything. She was undeniably intelligent, resourceful, ambitious. She saw opportunities where others saw obstacles.
But she also did some truly horrific things.
Yes, she did. Things that most people couldn't even fathom.
And that's what makes this whole grifter versus gifted debate so fascinating. Where's the line between ambition and ruthlessness? Between survival and exploitation?
Yeah, it's a blurry line. And it's easy to judge from our comfy chairs in the 21st century. But we have to remember the historical context, the societal norms, the individual circumstances that shaped her choices.
She came to America with dreams of a better life. But those dreams, they seem to have twisted into a nightmare of greed and violence.
It's a tragic story no matter how you look at it.
Whether she was a visionary or a con artist, There's no doubt that Belle Gunness left her mark on history, a dark and disturbing legacy that still fascinates and horrifies us over a century later.
It's a story that stays with you. A reminder that the pursuit of success and happiness, it can lead down some very dark paths.
And maybe it's also a reminder to be wary of those who seem too good to be true, to look beyond the charm and the promises and really question their motives.
Exactly. Don't let your desire for a better life blind you to the potential dangers.
So what do you think, listeners? Was Belle Gunness a visionary, a con artist, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, be sure to check out our other episodes, where we continue to explore the lives of history's most fascinating and controversial figures.
There are so many more stories to uncover, so many more questions to ask.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the human enigma.